not doing well. I mean, already there was an attack here in Beijing. A Jewish embassy official was attacked in broad daylight. I mean, what you have here is a chain reaction of hatred and death that is following around. It is time to stop that cycle. Two-state solution. Everybody knows that that's the only way out. And unfortunately, no one wants to admit it now. Everyone's rushing to say, I'm with this guy or that guy. Right now, there are only villains and victims, no heroes.
So does China see that it might have some sort of mediation role after its success, perhaps with Saudi Arabia and Iran? Does China see that?
Well, I think you make the mistake of inferring that the Chinese take on this same role that the U.S. does. Look, China, this is not a political plaything for domestic audiences. China is more than happy to be a part of any peaceful resolution. They'd be happy to have the U.S., Russia, anybody who could stop this carnage. You have 2 million people there, 1 million children. How is this going to work? All right? Adding more tragedy, it's incredible to me that we're creating a chain. The children that who live through this bombardment, all right, what's going to happen to them? How easily will they be radicalized? This is an ongoing chain of situation, and instead of having responsible governments saying, look, everyone needs to calm down, we need to start talking instead of throwing bullets and bombs at each other, you're not hearing that. It's just all about taking sides.
Ashok, the government in India has been more vocal in its support of Israel's Narendra Modi saying we stand in solidarity with Israel, but this is from the country that was the first non-Arab country to recognize the PLO and then the state of, then the Palestinian state. What has changed in India with Modi?
I think, as we all know, that the Modi and the Hindu nationalist government, which always wanted or has been traditionally been closer to the Israel. Of course, the relationship is quite old, despite India recently recognized Israel or went on from the diplomatic relation in the early 90s. But what has happened here, I think he came out quite strongly, saying that India is with Israel, or even described Hamas as a terrorist organization. Though the Indian law doesn't really look at that way, I think then they went on like this because the reason is exactly the anti-Muslim or Islamophobic ideas which they do have, or the present government has. And that is one thing which really pushes them to be closer to Israel, and also Israel. They have very strong military or security relationship now with Israel. So saying that, I think what has happened now, there has been, of course, a very strong public opinion. It's not only 200 million Muslims, those who live in India, but also large-scale public opinion is in favor of our Palestinian cause. And I think that has also now they have realized. And today they have made a statement, which the foreign ministry has come out with a statement, which is making it balanced a bit rather than what they did or what Modi did in the beginning.
So is there a sign of an attempt by Modi to have a more assertive foreign policy, or is the foreign ministry trying to draw that back in again then?
That's right. They have tried to make it sound like they are worried about what is going to happen. They also reiterated that they are in favor of the two-state solution. They are trying to say that, look, what is happening, we are worried about the humanitarian issues in Gaza. That was missing completely in the beginning. And I think it has come basically, as I said, because of the pressure from the public opinion, and also they realize that the Indian history India is just become independent 78 years back. They do have that kind of way of a colonial past, which they understand very well, the Indian public very well, that what is happening in Palestine. So I think they couldn't really, because it's somehow now they have to adopt this balanced approach, the Indian Foreign Ministry, just to dilute what Modi has said before.
Okay. Pavel, back to Russia. Is Russia worried about Iran and what Iran thinks, given that now it's one of the primary suppliers of arms to Russia as it continues its war in Ukraine?
Of course, Ukraine is the right now main focus point of all Russian policies, internal and external. And Iran has been supportive of it, and there's been increasingly close ties between Moscow and Tehran, and Russia would not want to really get on the wrong side of the Iranians. So yes, there's that Russian policies in the Middle East Russia will tread very, very carefully, not to worsen relations with Israel, not to worsen relations with Iran at the same time, and keeping in mind all the time that the main enemy is the United States. So if the United States becomes more closely involved in what's happening in the Middle East, or even becomes involved militarily, that's where Russia will be a very important red line. And also, if there's any threat to the Russian ally, the regime of Assad in Damascus, and of course Russia has a military presence in Syria, then Russia could actually become maybe even militarily involved, though right now that seems remote. So there are possibilities for the Russian position to change, because being a friend of Iran and being at the same time a friend of Israel, but an enemy of America, is a very precarious position to have. I mean, it's even just, it's easy to step aside and everything, this house of cards will simply tumble.
But nobody wants to see this, of course, brought into a wider Middle East conflict, but would Russia be willing to take sides if that happened? If US comes down on the side of Israel, will Russia take sides? Will it have to?
Well, they'll try to avoid it again, because our hands are full with Ukraine, but we have a contingent in Syria, their fighter jets and their anti-aircraft capabilities there. That could possibly get involved in any kind if the fray moves seriously into Syria. And Hezbollah also gets involved very much. That's where Russia could get involved too.
And Einar, touching on Iran again for China, how high are the stakes for China if this conflict broadens out in the Middle East? It took 87% of Iran's oil exports in the last couple of years. It, in fact, takes more oil from the Middle East than the US does. So there's a lot at stake, is there, for China?
Well, there's a lot of stake in terms of energy, but quite frankly, China's position is it's not going to get involved in anything militarily. There are no alliances. What they're going to continue to do is call for peace and talks, because it's the only rational thing you can do. Bullets and bombs and killing children is not going to end this tragedy that's been going on for these many years. So at this point, China is not in a position to even act militarily. The closest thing they have is Djibouti, and that is just a resupply station for anti-piracy. So there's no question about any kind of military involvement. In terms of Iran, Iran has their own position on this. They obviously back Hezbollah, which backs the Gazan entities there that attacked Hamas. The real danger here is that, I was on a show where you had an American, a Brit, and an Israeli saying that peace at any cost. And they were talking about moving everybody out of Gaza. I don't know how you marshal 1.4 million people out of there. And they said, but with no sense of the consequences of what that would mean down the road. And this could lead to a war in Syria, because...
Well, I was just going to say, Anna, what I mean is there more at stake for China than there is, say, for the US in the Middle East, because of China's much greater reliance on energy from the Middle East than the US. The US can back Israel, as it has done unequivocally, without pulling Israel back, but China has more at stake.
Well, it does, but the U.S. would not go unscathed. Right now, it's concerned about inflation. The global oil prices are already spiking. You're already starting to see spikes also in fertilizers. this is going to lead to more inflation in the U.S., that is not going to be welcome. They might get a little bit of bump out of selling excess oil across the seas, but this is a global issue. We've had two now. We have Ukraine, and now we have Israel. These are undermining the very basic structure of our economy, which is about a global supply system where demand creates jobs and opportunities. And right now, none of that is happening.
Okay. Ashok, you've written that you thought it might be better for India to take a more neutral stance, but isn't there more in this for India to back Israel in terms of defense, in terms of trade and defense and security cooperation? There's a lot of significant ties there for India.
Yeah, but I think India is not Russia or China. India is India. And I think we know that India has limitations also on the security front, but or how it can be engaged militarily, but it has other strength which you could have. That's why I thought that it should be better that it keeps a neutral stance. India, despite its, or particularly the Modi regime, despite its increased or the improved relationship with Israel or very strong security and military cooperation with Israel, it has also developed very strong cooperation in the Gulf countries. And this is where I think the challenge comes in, because India must realize that if this conflict lingers, this violence continues, that will be a very different place how to manage this relationship together. And I think it is also important to realize that India has a strong diaspora community which is there, and which has also, there will be a very big divisions within the diaspora community how they will look at this conflict. So I think it has lots of challenge which India really didn't that big. We don't like this kind of conflict with the Israel. I understand that they have developed strong security relations with Israel, and they do have ideological link with the with the internationalism and the Zionism. But I think it is also very important for them to look at where India stands, what India can do, and what are the India's own interests can be served, because by keeping a neutral position.
So then, so are you saying that Modi's condemnation of Hamas, his clear condemnation of Hamas, could affect India's relations with Arab states?
What I'm saying is that if the relations, if the violence, if the conflict starts escalating, if the conflict becoming much more larger than what it is now, then it will be put India into a kind of bracket which is not very possible for it to maintain the close relationship with the Gulf countries as well as maintain close relationship with Israel. So that will create a number of complications, many complications economic-wise, foreign policy-wise. It's also relationship with Pakistan as well as China. So, and also it's a diaspora presence in that region. And I think that's why it is very important that India maintains a neutral position, because it has already developed a strong relationship with Israel. But India is also extremely dependent on now having a very strong relationship, or at least a working relationship, with the rest of the Arab countries, particularly the Gulf.
Okay. Pavel, is Russia a beneficiary for now of Washington's change of focus from Ukraine to Israel?
Well, yes, that's a hope that's been expressed much in Moscow, that now the West is going to be involved in centering its efforts on the Middle East, and that means they won't have more resources or tension, actually, of the top leadership of the West on Ukraine, especially in the United States, where there's also dysfunctional right now Congress. And so there's hope that Ukraine may be left out in the cold. I don't know how that will work out, but of course right now we're going into autumn, winter, and the bad weather, and so most likely there's going to be some pause in the fighting in Ukrainian fronts inevitably. And while that happens, that pause happens, maybe the problems in the Middle East will at least de-escalate to some extent. But right now, yes, there's hope that this is going to work out, and maybe in Russia's favor.
But, I mean, in years past, Vladimir Putin might have sought ways to cooperate with Western countries, mightn't he, to broker an end to the fighting. But there's not much incentive for him to do that now, is there, I guess?
Well, right now, they're simply, technically, that's practically impossible because Russian and American diplomats are not talking to each other almost at all. I mean, they can't get together because they're not getting together. And that's, of course, a very serious problem because communications between Moscow and Washington are almost broke down, as between Moscow and Brussels.
I know Beijing has tried to stay on friendly terms with the Muslim world. Does that give it an incentive to try and be a sort of a stakeholder in becoming a stabilizing force, trying and become a stabilizing force in the Middle East?
Well, I think it behooves all powers in the world to try to be a stabilizing force. Who does it benefit? I mean, you've been asking questions. Does it benefit India or Russia or the U.S. or China? It doesn't. This is all negative. There's no good news here. So this idea that, this is a calculated game, no, it isn't. This is a situation that's been going on for many, many years. It finally exploded. People are horrified. More horrifying things are happening. But let's say you are a Muslim today in the world, and you're looking at this situation, and you're looking at, the U.S. and other countries demanding that you, quote, stand with Israel, or that you're some sort of war criminal. There are many people in the Middle East, Muslims, who feel very differently about this. So right now, you're creating this kind of touch point where people are going to remember how things played out. And this is not good for the world. The last thing we need is more sectarian violence. So at this juncture, yes, China is very aware that there are forces that are trying to tear the world apart. There are countries that think that bullets and bombs are the solution. They don't believe that.
Ashok, Modi used to be worried about the reaction of Muslims in India. Is he bothered anymore? Has he written off their support for the national elections next year?
Modi is very least interested in the Indian Muslim support because I don't think anything, whatever he has done already for the 9.5 years, is not going to get the Muslim vote, or very little, he might. But I think, but that's Modi's most worry should be, I think, because if the conflict goes out of hand, the way situation is, it's also India is already divided. India is getting a lot of challenge, or his politics is getting a lot of challenge by not only Muslims but also other political parties and other groups. So I think he is much more worried about his election, but also this creates another challenge for him, how he will do it. But I think overall, I think we need to know that it will be India's best interest if the peace and stability comes up to that region, because it's a very important region for India, India's economic ambitions, India's foreign policy challenges. And I think he's probably, whether he understands it or not, India's foreign policy establishment has finally realized that they cannot play this, that in one-sided game in this situation. But also, as you was told before, it's extremely important to be looking at the peace and justice in the region, and which has a huge impact on the global peace and justice. And I think it's very much necessary that Modi need to really realize that, or if Modi doesn't, India should.
Very, very quickly, Ashok, does India have an eye on how the US has reacted? India didn't criticize Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That frustrated the Biden administration. Does India want to signal to the US support, its support here?
Yes, India is actually a bit more desperate now to get the US support, particularly the challenge which has come from the Canada. Canada's Prime Minister has accused India for committing a political assassination in Canada, and that really needs India support. India needs that support from the US, and I think that's what has made him desperate to get that. And of course, it has some kind of India's balancing game in Ukraine also put some kind of ideas that if they really go for a US, then that probably helps.
Okay, gentlemen, we're out of time, but thanks to for your perspectives. Thanks to all of our guests, to Pavel Felgenhauer, Einar Tangen, and Ashok Swain, and thank you to for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. We are at AJ Inside Story. From me, Bernard Smith, and the whole team here, bye for now.
As the Gaza war escalates, Al Jazeera's correspondents are on the ground.
This morning hasn't stopped bombardment, but it's not just airstrikes, it's tank shells and gunboats from the sea.
There's been a lot of destruction here in the village of Kafar Azar.
The ambulances can't deal with the number of bodies from the southern part of Israel. The air jets are hovering right above us.
Stay with us for the latest developments on Al Jazeera.
Amidst the world's slowdown, we stand firm as home to a fifth of global nickel reserves. Indonesia is poised to lead the global EV battery industry. We adeptly manage our abundant resources and play a vital role in solar energy harnessing, offering 75% of global carbon credit potential, committed to environmental protection, enhancing investment climate through digital licensing. Indonesia, your better tomorrow.
This is the News Hour live from Doha, coming up in the next 60 minutes. Killed while trying to flee, 70 civilians are hit by Israeli strikes on what was supposed to be a safe route to southern Gaza. A humanitarian crisis intensifies. The World Health Organization says moving patients from overwhelmed hospitals is a death sentence and wants the evacuation order reversed. A group of journalists, including Al Jazeera's team, is hit by an Israeli strike in southern Lebanon. A Reuters cameraman has been killed. Diplomatic efforts intensify as the Emir of Qatar meets the US Secretary of State in Doha. And from Cairo to Baghdad and Sana to Istanbul, rallies are held across cities to show solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. We begin in Gaza, where at least 70 Palestinians, mostly women and children, have been killed by Israeli airstrikes. They were seeking sanctuary on what was supposed to be a safe route out of northern Gaza, heading south. Now, scenes of fear and panic have enveloped the besieged territory. 1 million Palestinians are now in what's been called a situation. In an unprecedented move, Israel has ordered the evacuation of everyone in the north, including densely packed refugee camps and hospitals. The World Health Organization has called it a death sentence and wants the evacuation order rescinded. After nearly a week of airstrikes, Israel's bombardment of Gaza has killed more than 1,800 people. The combined populations of North Gaza and Gaza City have been told their only safety is south of the Wadi, Gaza. But those regions are just as heavily populated and also subject to Israel's bombing campaign. In Rafah, the southern border to Egypt is closed due to those attacks. Now, even if it was open, it would remain closed to Palestinians from Gaza. Our correspondent Yumna El Sayed has made the journey from Gaza City to Khan Yunis in South Gaza, and she sent us this report.
We're heading now. Our bunch is 3 cars. This car in front of us and another one behind us. This is how the streets look now. Nicest neighborhood in Gaza.
Vs has rejected Israel's threat to the people of Gaza. Here's a statement from the movement. It says, "We adamantly reject to be expelled from our homes once again. We will resist Israel's attempt to ethnically cleanse Gaza." Israel has publicly declared its plan to commit genocide against Palestinians. What the Zionists are doing is inhumane. It is unprecedented. We will either live standing tall or we will die fighting. Tarek Abu Azoum is live for us inside Gaza. And can you just explain exactly where you are? It looks paint us a picture of what is happening there this evening.
Well, we are right now in Al Nasser medical complex inside the Khan Yunis city, southern the Gaza Strip, an area which was determined by the Israeli occupation forces, which allow civilians to be evacuated. And meanwhile, different bombardments were really heard during the last hour in this area. So, despite the fact that this particular area was allowed to be evacuated in, meanwhile it also was a very clear target for the Israeli ongoing strikes inside the Gaza Strip. Now, as you can clearly see now, this place become full of people, full of displaced people without proper necessities. They are just laying on the ground. They're waiting to the end of this round of fighting. They don't have any other safe place to go to due to the Israeli destruction of more than 10,000 of Palestinians, let's say, residential areas. So we can clearly understand that throughout the process of evacuation, even the Israeli occupation forces are trying to intervene and even to provocate the norms of the international laws in terms of protecting civilians in times of war as well.
Tarek, in the last few hours, we know that 70 Palestinians, mostly women and children, have been killed by Israeli airstrikes. They were seeking sanctuary on, what was meant to be a safe route from the north down to the south. Do you have any more details about that specific incident? And I guess that was one of the great fears of people who were heeding that evacuation order, that they could be hit as they were trying to leave their homes.
Well, I was one of the people who were evacuated today from the northern areas to the southern areas of the Gaza Strip. The majority of Gaza Strip streets were full of cars evacuating the houses to the southern areas of the besieged enclave. Now, this truck was full of people. Around 70 Palestinians were killed due to the Israeli bombardment of that vehicle, and a number of casualties also were recorded. Now, there were innocent civilians. They were evacuating the houses. They are following the orders of the Israeli occupation forces to leave the house and even to be safe from the Israeli bombardment, as it has been drone by the Israeli occupation forces. Meanwhile, they won't be protected. They were critically targeted, and even another people who are really till now stuck in the northern areas of the Gaza Strip are afraid to flee due to being bombarded, as what happened today for this family.
Okay, thank you so much for that update. That is Tarek Abu Azoum for us inside Gaza. Hospitals in Gaza are overwhelmed. Already more than 6,000 wounded people need treatment. And that number continues to grow. Medical staff say attempting to relocate them is unthinkable. Entire families have been killed in the last 7 days. Some of the people of Gaza are mourning their dead. Marwan Jalani, Director General of the Palestine Red Crescent Society, joins us from Ramallah now. Thank you very much for your time here on Al Jazeera. I can only imagine how busy you are. I guess, first of all, we've just heard that 70 Palestinians, many of them women and children, have been killed by Israeli airstrikes as they were trying to make their way from the north of Gaza to the south in supposedly safe corridors. What do you make of that? And I guess that is one of the great risks as people are evacuating the north of Gaza.
That's true. This is what we are hearing from the people. Right now, just before going on air, about 15 minutes ago or 30 minutes, we lost for time, I received a call from our colleague in Al-Quds Hospital that there was a bomb. They don't know what kind of a bomb, very heavy, just behind our hospital. Operation room, false ceiling fell down, but the point is we have 2,000 people who sought refuge in the hospital. So we tried to put them in the basement in a safe place. Just before that, a couple of hours earlier, we have communicated to ICRC to communicate to the Israeli side that this hospital has patients, has wounded people, and has this number of IDPs who have sought refuge in this hospital. So in order to make sure that this hospital will not be targeted. But unfortunately, there's no safe place in Gaza. And the people who are in the hospital seeking refuge are telling us where to go. If we leave here, we don't have any safe place to go. And as you said, even on the road to move to the south of Gaza, they are being targeted. And we have heard a number of incidents where the road is not safe, even when they try to evacuate. It's unthinkable, first of all, to ask people to evacuate while bombardment is still going on. Nevertheless, provide a safe corridor, and the whole burden of moving 1 million people in a few hours without the capacity in any organization, without the capacity of anybody to be able to do that, especially that the international organizations have left already. They were the first one who have evacuated Gaza and went to the south.
The WHO, the World Health Organization, has pleaded for the immediate reversal of the evacuation order. I imagine you would be right in behind that plea as well. What happens in a few hours, 24 hours on since Israel demanded everyone leave the north of Gaza? What happens those that stay, and if Israel were to escalate further from here?
We did issue actually a statement early this morning, and we called upon the international community really to put pressure to rescind this order, because it's unthinkable. It is beyond any belief that this order is coming in the middle of bombardment. As I said, 1 million people are asked to leave without safe corridors, without the capacity to evacuate them, and then not talking about the patients, the wounded, the elderly, the children. It's impossible. Yeah. So we also called on the international community to put pressure. If this order is not rescinded, and because right now, and there is only a few hours left for this deadline, people are still in Gaza. As I said, we have 2,000 people in our hospital. They are not going anywhere. And we are going to stay there with them and with the wounded, because we don't have the capacity to evacuate them or evacuate the wounded. So what will happen? We have said in our statement, this is a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding before our eyes. And unfortunately, I'm not sure what the world leaders are waiting for, what they are doing. They are seeing, they are witnessing a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding.
Yeah. And
I don't think they need to wait after what we see. The intervention should be now and immediately.
Yeah, and
in order to rescind.
We're watching it unfold in real time, aren't we? I just also want to ask about the supplies, because we know that they have been dwindling over the last few days. Food, water, medical supplies, fuel to keep the hospitals operating. I mean, how close are you to running out?
I could say we have already run out of water and food, because we have these 2,000 people who are in the hospital. We had some supplies for our hospital, considering the number of patients that we will have, the wounded. But with 2,000 people staying in our hospital, we already are running out of water, we are running out of food, and people are scrambling. We tried, and we still are trying, to reach to our warehouse, which is a little bit further than our hospital, to try to get those supplies, some of the supplies. We don't have enough, but we try to get some of the supply to those people and to our hospital. But the water, the food is running out, not to mention the fuel, where we have no fuel to continue to operate. I think we have 1 day maybe left to operate the hospital. We were expecting to have a supply of fuel from the WHO today. They promised us that was 2 days ago, that they will release from their strategic reserve some fuel for our hospital. That the plan was for the fuel to be transported today. Obviously, there was no transportation, so I think by tomorrow we will run out totally of fuel for our hospital and for our ambulance services. And this is going to be catastrophic. I think people today even are not thinking of food and water. They're just barely surviving. But they are so fearful for their lives. They are thinking about the bombardment. They are thinking about, will they bombard the hospital? And quite honestly, even this, people believe, yes, they will do, because nobody is paying attention to the people of Gaza. It seems the whole world has turned their back on them.
Thank you so much, Marwan. We really do appreciate your time and just giving us a real insight into what it is like there inside Gaza. That is Marwan Jalani, Director General of the Palestine Red Crescent Society. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A group of journalists, including an Al Jazeera team, has been hit by an Israeli strike in southern Lebanon. Reuters cameraman Issam Abdallah has been killed. Al Jazeera journalists Carmen Jukada and Eli Brakir have been injured and have been taken to hospital. They were in a car when they were hit. Journalists from AFP were also hit in Alma al-Shab near the Israeli border. Well, Al Jazeera's Lebanon bureau chief Mazen Ibrahim was there just after it happened.
This is what happened. All the journalists were here together. It's a type of safety measure. This is to make sure that both the resistance and Israel know that we are journalists and in one location. I can clearly say that we, the journalists, were targeted on purpose. We were far from the confrontations. The confrontations are up this hill, over the horizon, where the fires are. This spot is where the journalist was. All of the journalists were wearing the safety kit. They all had the press slogan on their chest and cars. This car behind me, the one that is totally damaged, is the Al Jazeera car. The Al Jazeera crew was inside this car. My colleagues were transferred to hospitals. Reporter Carmen Jukada and cameraman Eli Brakir. One other cameraman was killed. Journalists were killed and injured while doing their work.
Ali Hashim joins us live from Alma al-Shab in Lebanon. And Ali, can you just run us through what happened over the last few hours with this strike?
In front of the hospital where our colleagues are. As a matter of fact, this was a deliberate attack on a group of journalists who were clearly identified, and they were wearing their kits, having the press on their kits, on their helmets. Everything was there to prove and to show and to stress that they were journalists. This group of journalists, and I was actually with my colleague Rad, we were with them, and then we separated. We went to somewhere else, and they decided to go to this hill that was overlooking the whole area. So we were in this area for the past 4 or 5 days, going and coming, back and forth. The Israeli army that's monitoring this road on the border line knew very well that this group of journalists are moving together from one place to another. We were in the morning in Marwa to Haira, then we separated, and then they launched their shells on our colleagues. I was with our colleague Carmen Jo Khadar here at this hospital. We met her, we told her, made sure she's okay. She has a lot of injuries. She's in a good situation. Our colleague also, Eli Brakir, he's also wounded and injured. Also, he's in a stable situation. Unfortunately, we lost our colleague from Reuters, Issam Abdallah. Unfortunately, it was how it happened. These journalists were hit, directly hit, deliberately hit, despite the fact clearly they were showing that they were journalists.
Yeah. Ali, we've been talking to you throughout the afternoon there in the lead up to this attack. Can you just explain for people that might not know the threat and the escalating violence that had been cropping up along that borderline there?
Well, Tom, as I told you, we were in that place on the borders between Lebanon and Israel since this morning and over the past few days. But we were moving all together from one place to another. So we understood that there are threats. As journalists, we wanted to be together till the last few, maybe couple of hours. Then we separated, myself, and the cameraman, along with other 2 or 3 journalists. We went to the town where the attack happened, and the other journalists went to the hill. And actually, they were hit when they went to that place, deliberately, as I said. On the line was escalating hour after hour. There was an attack, an attempt to infiltrate the border. The Israelis hit, and actually the place where the infiltration happened is far away from where our colleagues were. It's very far from where the colleagues were. And then the Israelis started shelling the area surrounding the area, the place where the infiltration was happening. They hit a Lebanese army post, an empty post. They hit some bushes surrounding the borders. They hit the vicinity of Al-Mash'ab, Naqura, Yarin. And then the last hit, literally the last hit, was for our colleagues. And we saw it. Actually, we didn't know that. We were giving a live hit for Al Jazeera from one of the neighborhoods in Al-Mash'ab, and then we saw this black smoke coming out from the hill. And we started talking that this might be a vehicle. We thought it's maybe an army vehicle, a vehicle for Hezbollah, for the Palestinians, whoever is in that area. And we didn't even imagine it's going to be our colleagues who we were with just kind of couple of hours ago.
Okay, thank you so much, Ali. We really do appreciate all your hard work. It's a reminder of the sacrifices that you and all the teams out there in the field make every day. Thank you so much. The US Secretary of State has arrived in Qatar to discuss the Gaza war. Antony Blinken's visit comes hours after he met Palestinian presidents Mahmoud Abbas and Jordan. Abbas compared Israel's order to evacuate North Gaza to a second Nakba. The term Nakba, or the catastrophe, refers to the forced exodus of Palestinians from their homes in 1948, when the State of Israel was created. Well, last hour, Blinken held a joint press conference alongside Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani. Both men affirmed their commitment to finding a diplomatic solution to the crisis.
Now, our key focus for us in the state of Qatar, and I believe the United States sharing with us this objective, is how to put an end for this conflict, how to de-escalate, how to create a humanitarian corridor, and how to get the hostages back safely.
The United States and Qatar share the goal of preventing this conflict from spreading. We discussed in detail our efforts to prevent any actor, state or non-state, from creating a new front in this conflict. We're also working intensively together to secure the release of hostages, including American citizens being held by Hamas in Gaza. I'm grateful for the urgency that Qatar is bringing to this effort.
Well, let's bring in Marwan Bashara. He is Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. He joins us from Paris now. And as we heard there, that both sides, both the US and Qatar, want to find a diplomatic solution to this crisis. But they both define this crisis very differently, don't they?
Absolutely. I think the United States is simply looking for ways to help Israel. And Qatar and other Arab countries are trying to find a diplomatic way out of this tragedy before a more tragic genocide takes place in Gaza. I think the United States remains adamant on its earlier position that there is no diplomacy to be had as long as Hamas exists, or until and unless Hamas is defeated. And the only voice to be heard now is the voice of artillery and bombing, while for Qatar and other Arab countries, including those that we've heard in a statement in the Arab League of foreign ministers of Arab countries, basically speaking about the need to stop and the need to look for alternative solutions to the military one that could end up burning not only Palestine, Israel, but the entire region.
They both said that they want to see this conflict, they want to avoid it from spreading further to other parts of the region. What specifically do you think that they're talking about there, or what are they specifically worried about?
Well, there are two ways of looking at this. I mean, and it's actually very important to highlight the nuance here, the difference. The United States, for the last 4 or 5 days, have been emphasizing one particular thing under this headline, don't, right? And to their mind, the entire region now needs to keep quiet, needs to shut up, while Israel does what Israel needs to do as long as it takes in order to crush Hamas, even if that means basically shutting down and destroying an entire Gaza Strip with 2 million people in it. And that's how they see it now, that they are the guarantor of Israel's security as it crushes the Palestinians. The Arab world see it differently. They see that this conflict in Palestine could, in fact, mutate and proliferate and basically bring out more of a wider war in the region, with various implications in Syria and Lebanon and beyond. And they are afraid also that there's a pent-up violence not only in the Palestine street, but also in the Arab street. If you see the demonstrations now that started to take off in various Arab capitals, you can tell that the Arab public opinion, contrary to the official Western opinion, is quite in solidarity with Palestine. And I think many of the Arab leaders are beginning to worry about the repercussions of further deteriorations in Palestine on the stability within their own countries. Because as we all know from decades of public opinion surveys, is that the Arab street remains in its absolute majority quite attached to the Palestinian cause, in part because the Palestinian cause is an anti-colonial cause, but also because it reflects their own suffering within their own countries. It kind of symbolizes an overall struggle for justice. So Palestine tends to echo in the Middle East and the Islamic world. And that's the thing that the West seems to be, completely oblivious to it. And so when Western leaders...
Okay, Marwan, we're going to have to cut you off there because Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is speaking now. Let's listen in.
A lot of families who lost their members or have members who are missing. We will never forget what have been done, all those terrorist acts, and we will not forgive. And we will not anyone forget this tragedy. Israel, who is delivering a speech in Tel Aviv, and that is talking about what Israel is currently doing. We support our country, and we will eliminate Hamas, and we will make victory. It will take time, but we will finish and end this war stronger than ever. God will revenge from all our enemies, those who attacked us. Thank you.
Okay, that was Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, speaking very briefly there. We're going to go back to Marwan Bashar, Al Jazeera senior political analyst, and from what we could hear from Netanyahu there, he didn't say anything that we hadn't heard before, Marwan. There's certainly nothing about this evacuation order for northern Gaza.
No, absolutely not. In fact, I caught up his words in Hebrew before the translator came on, and he's basically trying to emphasize that Israel is united and it will never forget what happened to it the last weekend. These were his opening words in Hebrew. And I think he's trying to channel the sort of voice of unity and steadfastness of the Israeli public and the Israeli military as it embarks on what seems to be some very tough, long war, painful war, as the way he put it in earlier times. And I think it's clear that he's presenting himself as a war leader now, and he's also getting this unconditional backing from the West. So I think, and I can imagine, as the Sabbath takes hold in Israel, I think there's going to be a lot of reflection about the day after the Sabbath and how the Israelis are going to be tackling the war in Gaza, which, as everyone seems to understand, is going to lead to tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of casualties.
Yeah. Just on the evacuation order that Israel gave almost 24 hours ago, if you ask 1 million people to move and they don't, what happens after that?
Well, that's the thing. I think Defense Minister Gallant was asked that during the press conference, in fact, at the end of the press conference. And I think he seems to avoid the question. He kind of just shakes his head. And I think we've heard from the White House that this is going to be impossible, that you cannot just give people 24 hours and expect 1 million people to just take off under some sort of an order of an enemy country, right? So I think it's clear now to everyone, including those in the United States and at the United Nations, that this is not doable. And hence, when he was asked whether he's going to have to postpone it or whether there's another deadline, again, he tried to avoid an answer, because I think Israel does not have an answer now to the ultimatum that they've given about 24 hours. This is certainly not workable, and clearly there's complications to its implementation, even if it's giving 72 hours and more, because the people in Gaza, including Hamas, of course, have a different opinion about this. It's not just because Israel gave an order that means that Palestinians who are, enemy of Israel are just going to now follow through on it. Of course, a lot of families with a lot of children will probably try to look for safety, and that's natural. You would expect it to, especially now that they will be, looking for some sort of a shelter in the southern part of Gaza. But I think many, as it seems, we've seen from some of the demonstrations now in Gaza, that many decided just to stay put. That will probably complicate everything furthermore. But I think it's normal also for people who have faced a trauma in their past about, refuge and displacement and redisplacement, that they feel that as if their destiny now is in their hands and in their very near future. And I think they don't feel anywhere in Gaza is safe. And as we've heard also from the various of your guests as well, that a lot of people just cannot take off and leave.
Yeah.
A lot of people are sick and elderly, children, and who don't have even means of transportations. And what do you do with a family of 7 once you just, take off and go somewhere south? Where are they going to sleep? How are they going to eat? How are they going to survive?
Yeah. I just want to go back to the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's little tour. I mean, he was in Doha today. He's also heading to Saudi Arabia, among other countries. I mean, is this a box-ticking exercise from the U.S., do you think?
In some ways it is, because clearly, I think this is a very important question. In some ways it is. They want to show that America, has the ears of all the sides, and maybe even some sort of a consent of sort, even if it's implicit. And certainly they're going to need all the help they can get from their Arab partners, as it were, when things get, much worse in Gaza. So I think opening channels with Arab capitals is necessary. But I think it's also more important that they're trying to get as many people as possible, as many leaders as possible on their side. But as we said before, the statement from the Arab League is already clear. While the Arab League is not taking, a tough position, they're not condemning Israel. In fact, the Arab League statement basically equated between Hamas and Israel, which was unheard of before this weekend, in the sense that the Arab League are always taking the position that whatever the Palestinians do under the headline of resisting occupation, and that there is no equivalency between the occupier and the occupied. But this time around, the Arab League statement seems to equate between the two. So already the Arab leaders are kind of, giving in. Although 4 countries, in particularly Algeria, Iraq, Syria, and another country now I can't remember. Anyway, they definitely registered their objections to the tone of the statement. So all in all, the Arab capitals are trying now to convince the United States to hold back Israel from causing a major tragedy by a land invasion of Gaza.
Okay, thanks so much, Marwan. We really do, as always, appreciate you breaking it all down for us. That is Marwan Bashara, our senior political analyst. Well, Stephanie Decker reports from southern Israel, where troops and military hardware have been massing near the border with Gaza.
Very heavy military presence all along the outskirts of Gaza. Tanks, there is outgoing artillery that we're hearing constantly as well. The sound of jets in the sky. We've seen airstrikes hit the northern part of the Gaza Strip, which is just a few kilometers away from us. The roads around here are deserted. The villages around here, this is the area where the Hamas fighters infiltrated and where those gun battles took place. So it's very, very tense. Also, this coming on a day when over 1 million Palestinians living just a few kilometers away from there are told to evacuate the entire northern area, Gaza City, and head south. Of course, they have nowhere to go, but the message here is that the army is extremely determined to, what they say, is finish off this fight. Of course, the big question here is of a looming ground offensive, which is going to be very difficult. But the biggest call-up of army reservists, 360,000, the biggest in Israel's history, amounting not just here in Gaza, but also along the northern border with Lebanon. Stephanie Decker, Al Jazeera, on the outskirts of Gaza.
The evacuation order issued by Israel has led to panic and fear among people of Gaza. Well, this is northern Gaza, home to the Jabalia refugee camp. It's the largest in the Strip, and 116,000 people live there. The Shati refugee camp is one of Gaza's most crowded. It's also in the north, along with a large number of UN facilities and hospitals, including Gaza's largest, the Al-Shifa Hospital. Israel wants all these people, including UN workers, to move to the south of Wadi Gaza. UN aid workers say the relocation of so many people is impossible. It's not clear how they could make that journey through rubble and constant Israeli bombardment to the south. UN-run schools in the south are already full of thousands of displaced Palestinians that are taking shelter. Well, Mohammed Mahawesh is a Gaza resident, and he joins us from there now. First of all, can you just explain exactly where you are in Gaza? Are you in the north, or have you evacuated to the south? Can you just give us a a bit of an idea of where you are and what is happening around you.
Hi, thanks for having me. First of all, we're just still residing in the city center of Gaza City. Me with my family, we have not been able to flee the homes through the southern governance of the Gaza Strip. What we have seen today is what many have called, including friends of journalism and friends of residences, that Palestinians are living in a vivid recollection of the reality of displacement and terror at the same time. It's been a very intense and tragic day in the Gaza Strip where hundreds and thousands of people have been fleeing and evacuating with the fear of those who remain of what their fate will be, including my family.
If you could leave, would you?
Of course we would, because at the end of the day, it's although there is nowhere safe in Gaza City, but at least there is some kind of like more people gathering in a place that would make the Israeli military reluctant to target those overly and densely crowded areas of evacuation at the end of the day, because what we have witnessed in the city center of Gaza City is just a scene of brutality and a scene of mass destruction that we would never hope to see again. Gaza has been now leveled to the ground in most of the areas. Entire neighborhoods has been destroyed and blackened. I mean, we are living in I mean, words are unable to describe what's the terror that we are having at the moment, but we're hoping that we can have some sort of safe corridor that we can like commute to.
Yes.
Basically, the difficulties that the people, including my family, are facing at the moment during the transportation process is that no civil crews are able to help those families that are rushing to flee.
Yeah.
Besides, the ambulance crews are able also to be operating at full capacity to be able also to transport the people who are hoping to evacuate their homes.
While you're speaking, while you're speaking, we're looking at pictures of just the total destruction of parts of Gaza, and it really does look like a magnitude 10 earthquake has gone off and just destroyed block after block there. What do you have left with you? We know that supplies have been dwindling over the last few days. Fuel, water, food, medical supplies, everything is running out. What do you have with you, and how long do you think it will last?
We have been, over the past 3 days, been pushed into further debilitating humanitarian crisis, dear, because at the moment I'm speaking with you with no electricity and with entire power blackout that has resulted in the devastation of food, of any supply of that we can have left. I mean, there is also no clean drinking water. We are struggling on a daily basis just to afford the minimum capacity of water that would be able and just sufficient for the rest of the day. I mean, for babies, for elderly, for women, for people in the neighborhood, it's all alike. I mean, fear and terror and also the lack of necessities are just pushing the people into further concern and anxiety, because we have also seen promises and threatening promises of the Israeli military that they could also cut off the internet services, which, I mean, until now, we don't know the consequences, but for sure, we know that they could be catastrophic.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, I think, that you had children. How are they coping? How old are they? And what do you say to them in a time like this?
Of course, yeah, I have a 2-year-old kid who is, by the way, he is not living his first war. He has actually lived his first when he was a couple of months in his mother's womb in 2021. So he had already made his first memories under the war. But now he is young enough to know what's happening outside, but also old enough to understand the scary explosions that are coming closer by the minute to our house. We tend to have some sort of distractions at the moment so that we can have our eyes and conversations and hugs cuddled together so that he could of comfort. Although there is not much of distractions at the moment. Electricity and power outages and entertainment are nothing of a reality at the moment in Gaza here.
Mohammed, thank you so much for sharing your story. We really do hope that you stay safe. That is Mohammed Mahawish, a Gaza resident. Thank you. Well, caught in the bombardment is the mother-in-law of Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf. Elizabeth El-Nakila was visiting her husband's family when the war erupted. She recorded this message from the southern Gaza Strip.
This will be my last video. Everybody from Gaza is moving towards where we are. 1 million people, no food, no water. And still they're bombing them as they leave. Where are we going to put them? But my thought is, all these people in the hospital cannot be evacuated. Where's humanity? Where's people's hearts in the world to let this happen in this day and age? And may God help us. Goodbye.
Well, before the war, Gaza was described as the world's largest open-air prison, held under a land, air and sea blockade by Israel for 16 years. Now, most of the people being bombed and forced from their homes are Palestinian refugees. Gaza was part of historic Palestine before more than 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homeland when the State of Israel was created in 1948. Palestinians refer to that as the Nakba or catastrophe. Now, 60% of them came to Gaza as refugees. Has denied their right of return in law. Today, refugees, mostly in these 8 UN-recognised camps, they are among the most densely populated areas in the world. And now more than 200,000 Palestinian refugees living in some of the largest and most crowded refugee camps in Gaza Strip are among the 1.1 million people being told to relocate to the south. Well, earlier, Al Jazeera spoke to Jan Egeland. He's the head of the Norwegian Refugee Council. He described a desperate situation in Gaza and pleaded for what he called a minimum of sanity to bring an end to the spiral of violence.
Israel has a great responsibility, and I'm saying that in all Western media now. Israel has to respect international humanitarian law. To forcibly relocate entire populations is a violation of the law. To have a siege and starve out 1.2 million is a violation of the law. We have to condemn that. But listen, all of the violations of Israel does not justify the killing of civilians or the holding of grandmothers and children as hostages. So I think we have to have some minimum of sanity here. And it could start now with a call for an end to the bombardment, an end to the siege, an end to the hostage taking, an end to the missiles going into Israel. It has to end before too many children are dead.
Residents in Gaza are using social media to describe daily life under Israeli bombardment. Iman Shanti describes what she carries in her emergency backpack.
As you can see, I'm wearing prayer clothes, which is our official uniform, or the outfit that we wear when there's an emergency situation. So this is what we usually wear, especially girls. Men have their uniform as well, just in case, God forbid, there's an escalation. We have something else that's very important. It's our emergency backpack. Maybe you're a little curious. So this is my backpack that I usually take with me when there's an escalation. Evacuate. So first I have the lights. to food, so at least we have dates to eat. I have my personal ID and my health card. In the second pocket, I have medicine and a first aid kit, just in case. I put it in this small bag. I have Kleenex tissues and perfumed wipes. I also have some other personal items in this backpack and our official documents to prove who we are. These are our official documents. Hopefully we will not have to use them. But it's just in case we need to present them or to avoid having to get them reissued in case there's a raid. I hope there will be no raids. And of course, my laptop. These are the items that I put in my bag when there's a strike, and a lot of women and mothers take these items with them. And as far as jewellery is concerned, I advise women to wear your precious jewellery, or to put it somewhere in your outfit by tailoring a pocket. Don't put it in the backpack, because you might lose the backpack. So it's better to wear them, or to find a way to carry them on you, so that you can keep them with you. And also give some to your kids. I hope that all our kids have their own emergency backpack with some personal items so that we can share the burden. So that's today's video about the emergency backpack. Many people wanted to know what we have in this bag. I hope that you all stay safe, and I hope that we stay safe.
The UN Secretary General has just begun speaking. Let's listen in.
The horrific terror attacks by Hamas on Israel that killed more than 1,200 people and injured thousands more last Saturday were followed by intense bombardment of Gaza that has already killed 1,800 people and injured thousands more. After days of airstrikes, the Israeli Defense Forces have ordered the Palestinians in Gaza City and its surroundings to move to the south of the territory. Moving more than 1 million people across a densely populated war zone to a place with no food, water, or accommodation when the entire territory is under siege is extremely dangerous and in some cases simply not possible. Hospitals in the south of Gaza are already at capacity and will not be able to accept thousands of new patients from the north. The health system is on the brink of collapse. Morgues are overflowing. 11 healthcare staff have been killed while on duty, and there have been 34 attacks on health facilities in the past few days. The entire territory faces a water crisis as infrastructure has been damaged and there is no electricity to power pumps and desalination plants. Our United Nations staff and our partners are working around the clock to support the people of Gaza. We mourn for our colleagues who have been killed, a number that is increasing by the day. I've been in constant contact with the leaders across the region, focus on ways to reduce suffering and prevent further dangerous escalation in the West Bank or elsewhere in the region, especially in southern Lebanon. The exchange of fire across the blue line is very worrying. It must stop. We need immediate humanitarian access throughout Gaza so that we can get fuel, food and water to everyone in need. Even wars have rules. International humanitarian law and human rights law must be respected and upheld. Civilians must be protected and also never used as shields. And all hostages in Gaza must be released immediately. It is imperative that all parties and those who have influence over them possible to achieve these steps. Finally, I want to say something about the hatred that is being stoked by this terrible conflict across the Middle East and around the world. Humanizing language that incites violence is never accepted. I call on all leaders to speak out against anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim bigotry, and hate speech of all kinds. This is a time for the international community to come together around protecting civilians and finding a lasting solution to to this unending cycle of death and destruction. Thank you.
Okay, that was the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres there speaking very briefly, saying that, reiterating that moving 1 million people across a territory that is being bombarded into an area that has no food or medical capability is simply not possible. That hospitals are already on the brink of collapse. The health system is at full capacity and medical staff have been killed in the line of duty. He also spoke about the water crisis as well as the fact that there is no electricity for pumps or desalination plants. So we're going to go to Shihab Ratamzi, who is at the United Nations in New York for more on this. Shihab said that there needs to be a plan. There needs to be immediate humanitarian access into Gaza. Does the UN have one? What is the plan at this point in time?
Well, we were told that the Secretary General has been working the phones. His spokesperson had a press conference shortly before the Secretary General spoke and said that the Secretary General has been working the phones with regional actors. But what was striking once again with the Secretary General's remarks to the world was once again he did not call for a ceasefire, nor did he even make any exhortation towards the Israelis as regards the bombardment of Gaza, the intensification of the siege, and so on. But at least in the statement that the UN released several hours ago, shortly after Israel notified the world of its evacuation order, which is clearly illegal under international law, and several UN agencies have said so themselves. At least then the Secretary General's spokesperson released a statement which strongly appealed for the evacuation order to be rescinded. We didn't get that from the Secretary General himself. All we got was a matter of fact. It's simply not possible. So there is, once again, there will be questions raised. There were just an hour ago with the Secretary General's spokesperson as to why there is no exhortation from the custodian of international law, of Geneva Conventions, the laws of war, of proportionality, for Israel to stop when it is quite prima facie clearly against international law. What Israel is currently up to. I'm afraid I think those questions are going to resurface once again. But he's going into that Security Council meeting once again, closed consultations of the members of the Security Council, which will be beginning shortly, we understand.
Yeah, Shihab, he also said the international community needs to come together to find a solution. I mean, if the UN can't find one, then who else is going to step up in its place?
There's always that argument is what do we mean by the UN, right? So we have the UN Security Council where we have those clear divisions. We have the United States, France, Britain, who from the public announced statements, either here in New York or from their individual governments, are simply looking for condemnation for Hamas and a green light for Israel. And then you have China, Russia, Brazil now, who are calling for an immediate ceasefire and end to violence against civilians. Those are clearly incompatible stances, which is probably another reason why we're unlikely to receive any statement. I see the Palestinian ambassador is walking to the podium, actually, so we'll keep an eye on that. I'm sure he's about to speak, in fact. So perhaps you want to go to that? I'm not sure.
No, we are going to just take a quick break in a minute, Shihab, but we will be back with you after the top of the hour. I just want to bring you up to date with the latest that is happening in Gaza. In the last few hours, 70 Palestinians, many of them women and children, have been killed by Israeli airstrikes as they were trying to seek sanctuary, moving down to the south. Well, that is all for me, Tom McRae, for this news hour. Emily Angwin will be back in just a moment with more of the day's news.